everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to our book club. I am Miss Maka.
And I am Mr. Deril. Today, we are going to talk about The Lost World.
By Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
He seems to be a favorite author of ours. We've talked about Sherlock Holmes. Today, we're talking about an adventure story.
Yes, but before we start talking about the story itself, let's look at our agenda. So the first thing we do is we introduce the vocabulary that you need. Then we will talk about the author. After that, we will talk about the summary of the book.
Then we'll talk about the characters, and then we'll have a look at the setting, the where and the when. And then finally, we'll have a look at the main themes, which looks at the whys of this story.
Yes, that's interesting. What are the messages from this story? And of course, we will conclude our seminar, today's session, and then we will give you a homework.
Very good. That's a good way to discuss with our TV audience.
Definitely. Now let's start with our vocabulary. Mr. Deril.
Okay, we have chosen 8 words to focus on. We use them in the discussion, and you can find them in the text if you look when you get to it. Okay, our first word is prosperous, an adjective. I'll say it again, prosperous. It's when you're rich and successful and you have gained a lot of wealth.
შეძლებული, წარმატებული.
Our next word is plateau. Plateau, a large flat area of land that is higher than the land around it.
ზეგანი.
Our next word is trap, to trap. Trap. This is to prevent someone from leaving. When you catch an animal or something, you kind of hold them there.
მახეში გაბმა, გამომწყდება.
Our next word is fierce, an adjective. It's fierce. This involves very strong feelings such as determination, anger, or hate.
მწვავე, მძვინვარე.
Our next word is drawback. It is drawback. This is when you have a feature of something that makes it less useful than it could be.
დაბრკოლება, წინააღმდეგობა.
Our next word is indigenous, and it's an adjective. Indigenous, indigenous. These are the original people that lived in a place for a very, very long time before the people that came afterwards.
ადგილობრივი, ბუნებრივი.
Our next word is another adjective, and it is dense. Dense. This is when you have a lot of trees, a lot of plants, or a lot of leaves growing close together. And it could be for anything, not just plants. When something is closely packed together.
ხშირი, მჭიდრო.
Our last word is skeptic. Skeptic. It's a noun, and it is skeptic. Someone who has doubts about things that others believe in or take for granted.
It sounds the same in Georgian, skeptikosi.
Very good. Do we have questions now?
Yes, of course. We have one vocabulary question for our audience. What are 2 synonyms of the word indigenous?
I think it is native and local.
Exactly.
That is true. It is.
And Mr. Deril, it can be said about people and some plants as well, right?
Yeah, you can have indigenous plants and indigenous people to a land that is there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, let us move to the author. Now, we have mentioned him before, but this time we're talking about his more adventuresome science fiction-y side. So we're leaving the detective stuff behind. He is, of course, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He's most famous as the inventor of Sherlock Holmes, but he has had a varied career. He's been a writer, a journalist, a public figure. He was born in Edinburgh, so that makes him Scottish, in the British Isles. But he trained as a doctor, and he gained his degree from Edinburgh University in 1881. He worked as a surgeon and a medical officer in the army. So he was in the army as well, and he worked in a medical capacity. He settled in Portsmouth in England on the south coast dividing his time between medicine and writing.
The stories about Sherlock Holmes and their success actually encouraged Conan Doyle to write even more stories involving Holmes. But in 1893, he finally decided to kill off Sherlock because he was hoping to concentrate on more serious writings. But public outcry that came afterwards really changed his mind. Conan Doyle wrote a number of novels, including A Lost World and other non-fictional stories. So there was also a pamphlet that was justifying Britain's involvement in Boer War and the World War I, where actually his nephew and his brother died.
Now there's a short other part to Conan. He was an unsuccessful politician. He ran unsuccessfully for parliament, and then he becomes very interested in spiritualism. So maybe it was the failure of the politics, but he became very interested in what's it called, astrology, spiritualism, and ghosts and stuff. Finally, he dies of heart attack in 1930.
Ooh, okay, that's sad. But we mentioned many interests that Arthur Conan Doyle actually had, right? So now we have a question to our audience. Is it possible to have two professions at the same time?
I would say that it's possible, but it depends on kind of jobs and personal abilities.
Very good answer.
Yeah, definitely, of course. But there are some people who have two professions, right?
It's quite common.
Yeah.
I've got another question for our audience. Why do you think Conan Doyle wanted to kill off Sherlock Holmes?
In my opinion, he wanted to write science fiction like The Lost World and not detective stories.
Very good answer. It is possible to become bored of something if you keep doing it again and again and again.
Yeah, so he tried his best in many
Different topics, different areas, and
Yeah,
so on.
exactly. Okay.
So let's move to the summary now. The Lost World is a science fiction novel, basically. It was published in 1912, maybe at the early years of science fiction at that time. A small fact, the movie Jurassic Park, its second movie, borrows the name of the movie from this book, in fact. If you remember, the second movie was called The Lost World.
Yes.
And that was directly from this inspiration. And in fact, the stories are similar, if you remember. Both are about a lost world with dinosaurs running around.
Oh, okay, that must be interesting to watch as well, right? So now let's move on to the plot of the story. The young reporter, Edward Malone, is a man who is in love with Gladys Hungerton, and he decides to marry her. But Gladys is a critical woman, and she's critical that the journalist has never done anything dangerous or spectacular in order to prove his love for her. Malone now finds out that he has a way to prove his love to Gladys by working as a journalist for a daily gazette. So Malone has the opportunity to follow the expedition that sounds a bit dangerous for him. So he would follow the professor named George Edward Challenger. The expedition is likely to be dangerous at the very least.
Sounds exciting so far. Now, Professor Challenger, who has been a once respected professor, has his reputation damaged because he happens to believe that there are prehistoric monsters, meaning dinosaurs or some kind of old ancient monster, living in the Amazon forest area, the basin area. To regain his scientific credibility, he decides that he must personally go to the Amazon and find out if his theories about these monsters are true or false. So he gathers up a crew of folk, some of whom are Professor Challenger himself, Professor Summerlee, a skeptic scientist, the Amazonian adventurer Lord John Roxton, and the newspaperman Ned Malone, our hero. And these are members of his expedition, and they all go off to the Amazon in South America. They arrive at the region where the mysterious plateau area is situated. The plateau has been cut off from civilization, cut off from all the surrounding people that live around it. And there's actually a simple bridge, a simple small bridge that connects our land and the plateau, and they cross it.
Yes, but you know, the locals also feared to get any closer to this plateau. But these 4 members of the expedition, actually, they were not really frightened. Then disaster befalls them when one of the local guides actually destroys the bridge that you mentioned that connects the real world to this lost world. And they were trapped in that place. After being trapped in the lost world, these curious members of expedition encounter lots of adventures there. Some of them are really dangerous. You should read this book. Of course, we are not going to tell you each and every detail of the book, but you will have to read the book yourself. But we can add that The Lost World would be one of the first mini-series of stories based on the adventures of Professor Challenger, with Malone and Roxton reappearing.
Let me tell you about the other 2 novels very quickly. The second book in this trilogy is called The Poison Belt, and it deals with the Earth when it travels through some space that is poisoned, hence the title of the book. And the third book in the series, The Land of the Mist, published in 1926, talks about life after death. So he kind of goes in that spiritual direction, as he was his interest at the time. So although we can conclude that Conan Doyle is famous for Sherlock Holmes, it doesn't mean that that's his only specialty. He was good at adventure stories, he was good at action stories, and today we are going to discuss that in more detail.
Okay, now let's have a question for our audience, right? So, do you think there are still undiscovered places or animals on Earth?
Yes, I think there are many things we don't know about our planet yet, so it's very likely that there may be some undiscovered things.
Thank you.
Very good answer. For example, there might be aliens out in space that we don't know anything about.
Oh, yeah, but what I definitely know that we all have chances to have this exploring or like to have this profession, explorer.
There's a lot of things left to explore.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. Now let's move on to our characters, so who actually make the story even more interesting. Our first character is Edward Malone. So he is a 23-year-old reporter for a daily gazette. So he is in love with Gladys Hungerton, who rejects his proposal of marriage because she wants a man who wants to face death to accomplish great deed. So Ned naively thinks that if he really undertakes such a task, she will then marry him.
Now, he is a talented man. It's not like he's not talented. He always thinks through his actions before he does something. He's confident in that way. But he goes against his nature in this situation, because he's chasing after this girl who may like him or may not like him, but he's determined to go through with it. He uses his intelligence to win an interview with the professor, and he pretends to be a science student to get into the expedition so he can prove his worth to Gladys.
Ooh, and also Ned shows true courage on the plateau as he does his part to keep himself and the others safe. So he also shows determination, so we can see that during the story he never gives up, even being attacked by pterodactyls or by the Akala to cause him to either give up or run away. But we can see in the story that he never runs away.
So in short, he's a talented and brave man. So
yes.
A typical hero.
Yes.
Our second character is another action hero, basically. He's Professor Challenger, a man of great self-confidence, a man who's ready to fight against the scientific establishment for what he believes in. He's got a fierce temper, and he's strong as well. So he's not some kind of professor that sits behind the desk somewhere. He's a man of action, suitable for an action story.
Yes, and actually it is he who comes and appears unannounced and takes over the expedition, where he never asks others what they want and what they don't really want. Maybe because this is that he expects them to do whatever he says. Actually, from the very beginning, they do that. But after he is challenged by the professor Summerlee, he still acts like he is in charge of the expedition, and he goes even as far as to charm the chief of the ape men in an effort to save Summerlee and Lord John. So we can see that he acts quite bossy and loves taking on responsibilities.
Another hero type.
Yes.
Well, our third character, Lord John Roxton, is another adventuresome persona. He's a man who seeks out adventure. He stands up for those who have no one else to defend them, as he did with the natives that were enslaved in South America. So he's a brave person.
Yes, so Lord John is a fearless man, and especially during the time when the men are on the plateau. He not only looks at some kind of wonders that are surrounding him, but also looks for any signs of danger. And he is always ready to warn the others, to be aware of the surroundings and of the danger.
Not only is he brave, he is generous. In the end, he shares his wealth, the diamonds that they find, with other people. So he's generous, brave, and heroic. 3 heroic characters so far. And now let's have a look at the 4th character and see how he is.
Yes, the 4th character, I would say that he is the oldest character in this story, Professor Summerlee. So he is 66 years old when he followed this expedition, and actually Lord John thinks that he would be a drawback. But we can see that Professor Summerlee proves that himself on the plateau, even though he is ill and injured. He still continues to try to pull his weight in helping to maintain the camp and to ensure the safety of the other men on the plateau.
There's a bit of conflict between him and Challenger, the 2 professors. Summerlee does not believe that dinosaurs exist in the lost world, and so they dispute over that for a while. And the problem is that Summerlee thinks that he is the intellectual equal of challengers, so they have a kind of ego contest for a while.
Yes, now what about our woman character? This is Gladys Hungerton. So she's an intelligent woman. She wants to become a wife of a famous person, okay, and she would be famous because of being his wife. So Ned goes out to gain such glory for her, but in the end of the story, we can see that he's heartbroken by her.
Exactly. And how is he heartbroken? Well, in the end, she chooses the other man. So she doesn't choose him. So all his efforts were almost for nothing, but yet not completely for nothing. Because Ned does gain stature, he gains experience, and he gains kind of self-confidence.
Of course. So maybe this was just a reason to go, and then he came back with other reasons.
Qualities.
Yeah, other qualities, yes.
Okay, I think you can ask our first question.
Okay, now our first question from the characters part. Do you think that Ed was a classic hero?
Yes, because even without any experience, he showed true courage and tried to keep himself and others safe.
Very good answer. Yes, he seems to have a lot of competition because 4-5 characters are adventuresome and classic heroes, but Ned proves himself as a hero as well.
Yes, and the lack of experience also proves that he was quite courageous, right?
On a similar question, I'm going to ask, was Professor Challenger a good leader or not?
No, he was not a good leader because I think that he was very bossy, and being bossy does not inspire other people to follow you.
Very good, very good. It's true. It's a good point that she brings up. The fact that you can be a hero, but you don't necessarily have to be a good leader.
Exactly. A good leader definitely should not really be bossy, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, let's move on to the setting section of our discussion, where we look at the when and the where of the story. I'm going to start with the when, okay? So it's set in the early part of the 20th century, and I think the story has been stated to be inspired by a friend of Conan Doyle. Now this friend took off on an expedition to Bolivia, and Doyle was very impressed with the stories that his friend told him about this area, that it was a dangerous area with lots of forests that no one could get into. And his friend says the following words, literally, there were monstrous foot tracks of unknown origin. Now this got Doyle's imagination going, and he thought, well, I can make a story out of that. And Doyle actually believed in his friend. He believed that the stories about monsters were true. And it's from there that the story of the Lost World was born.
Oh, such an interesting story. So maybe his friend was in Sataplia.
Sataplia?
Yeah.
Is that in Georgia?
Oh, come on, Daryl. Of course it is. So do you know why it is famous?
No.
Oh, there you can see lots of trails of dinosaurs. So it's kind of a lost world, maybe?
Georgian Lost World? You should write a novel about that.
Yeah, maybe. So now let's move to our where part. The two principal locations that the story is set, it is England and South America, Brazil. So in England, the action takes place amid the closed-minded and stodgy scientific establishment. The outrageous Professor Challenger seems out of place among these scientists, you know. For him, they are small-minded, boring people. So South America actually seems quite a better suited to his expansive personality. So the jungles there are quite dense and dangerous, and the people are the indigenous people. They are friendly.
And it's out on the plateau that he actually finds what he was looking for. He finds that life has not changed since the time of the dinosaurs, and he was proved to be correct.
Yes, so in the book, yes, definitely.
Okay, so we have our question for our setting section for our audience.
Definitely.
Why do you think Conan Doyle picked South America for the location of his novel?
I guess he chose so because, well, it still kind of was dangerous and mysterious, and that's exactly what the author wanted.
Very good answer. I think we're all attracted to dangerous things in a way, aren't we?
I don't know, not me, Mr. Dare. Definitely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really dare to go there, even with 4 members of the expedition. I think so.
You're not going to go looking for any lost worlds
No.
anytime
Thank you.
soon.
I love real world. Okay, now it's time for the main themes of the story. So the first main theme that we have to focus on is discovery and exploration. So discovery is a major theme, as we already mentioned. They are searching for a lost world, and scientific discovery happens throughout much of the book. The exploration is taking place in order to discover whether or not dinosaurs exist on this plateau in South America. While exploring the plateau, the crew members discovered not only the things they actually expected, but of course more than that.
We also have to talk about why he chooses to make it a discovery story. It's a kind of literary technique. It's a technique that he uses to tell the story. It's the process of exploring, going towards new places, expressing the scientific spirit of that era. It was a very scientific era as well. And so he's using all of these ways to express the age he lived in, the time he lived in, and the spirit of what the people believed in at that time. It was all about discovering the world, figuring out the science, the physics, the biology, the geography of the entire planet. And this story, in a sense, is the perfect story for that time, the early 20th century.
Yes, and even now, I would say. So what about the second main theme? Is a reward. So reward is another theme of this novel. All of the men go on the expedition for the reason other than to find the dinosaurs. Professor Challenger wants to find the dinosaurs so that he can prove the people who called him crazy that he is not as crazy as they thought.
And it's not just Challenger. A lot of the characters are looking for some kind of reward by going in on this expedition. For example, Lord John wants to become the more heroic persona that he imagines himself to be. Professor Summerlee is trying to prove that he is right and Challenger is wrong. And of course, Edward Malone is looking for love from Gladys, although he fails in that respect.
So actually, Mr. Derill, can we say that everyone needs some kind of reward?
That's a good point. Do we do anything without the promise of some kind of reward or a goal at the end of it?
I don't know. Maybe this is the topic of another discussion as well. It would be interesting, and especially to hear our audience. But right now, let's ask to our audience, what makes a good explorer?
Definitely courage, because it is very scary to go toward the unknown. Also, we need a good plan and a very good preparation. And I believe that going to the unknown with good friends will always help us.
Oh my God, thank you. That's really interesting. And I think with that answer, you're ready to go on an expedition, maybe with your friends.
It's not easy to go off on new discoveries, but well, with a student like this, maybe we are
Yeah,
ready.
new generation,
The new
new
generation.
places to be explored.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think it's time to wrap up the discussion. Ms. Maka.
Definitely. So as we told in our agenda, the first we talked about the author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
And then we talked about the summary. It's a young reporter, Ned, who goes off on a journey for reasons of his own, but finally gets what they want, some of them.
Exactly. Then we talked about the characters. So we had this two professors, different professors, the young reporter, and of course the woman Gladys.
Very good. Then we had a look at the setting, of course, and it's set in the early 20th century, a time of exploration and scientific advancement, which is why the story has the quality it has, and the location, South America.
Okay. So, and of course we focused on the themes, main themes. These themes were discovery and exploration and reward.
I think it's time to move on to the homework question of the day.
Okay, what is our homework, Mr. Derill?
Well, imagine that you are a member of this expedition trying to find dinosaurs. Maybe you're at Sataplia, who knows? Describe your preparation process. For example, what would you take and why would you need it?
Okay, now the homework in Georgian. წარმოიდგინეთ, რომ ხართ ამ ექსპედიციის წევრი და ცდილობთ იპოვნოთ დინოზავრები. აღწერეთ მზადების პროცესი, რას წაიღებდით და რატომ.
Make sure to send us your replies on the address shown on the screen.
დავალებები გადმოგვიგზავნეთ ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე.
Okay.
Okay?
I enjoyed the discussion today with our lovely audience.
Yes, so we do have some hopes that the audience might explore something new, maybe after our session. Okay, so that's all for today. So, see you next week.
Have a great week and goodbye.
Goodbye.